Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics I'm continuing looking to the Grand Tournament 2022, and this time it's looking at the changes to the secondary objectives and basically how much play is changing and the missions, etc. Focus on the secondary objectives and how they fit with Death Card, now with also in combination with the point increases or point cuts. For example, the Plague Scroller now costing less is good, but it will not so often be to the last target. Will we see more Plague Marines and, for example, cultists to do actions, etc. So, with no further ado, let's get started. So today, the 23rd of January, this has been truly a week with Nurgle's blessing in real life. So we got COVID this week, not so bad. Have been okay, a little bit feverish. Maybe you can hear my voice a bit raspy. But this in this video, I will be reviewing the tournaments to match play and the secondaries especially, and how they match death cards. So looking a bit how the overall changes to matched play will be from the Warzone Nakmund, the Grand Tournament, and then a review of the various changes to the secondaries and then how they can impact death card. And before I start, always a big thanks to my patrons and also the supporters, liking and subscribing to the channel, commenting, very interesting discussions for the points update, etc. And as I think it's been a bit tough time for us Death Card now with this a bit unwarranted point hikes to our terminators. But let's see what's going on in the secondaries department. So overall changes to matched play in general. Now armies cannot include multiple sub-factions from one faction. So for example, for Death Guard, we wouldn't be able to take a detachment of, for example, Poxmongers and another detachment of Inexorable, for example. I don't think this is a big issue for Death Guard. We can still make soup. You can take, let's say, you can take a detachment of Death Guard and then add the detachment of Nurgle Demons, or you add a detachment of Thousand Suns or whatever you want to do. But you can't take multiple sub factions from one faction. So for Thousand Suns, for example, this will be more impactful. You cannot, for example, combine the great cults, the cult of duplicity and the cult of time, but I think this is more an issue for Adept for the Battle Sisters or the Grey Knights, where they could do, let's say, multiple, getting advantage of multiple sub factions for specific units, allowing them to take more Grandmaster, Dread Knights, etc. Or Adeptus Mechanicus. Some of the units get Lucius for protection, others got Mars for to become very lethal, but now this has been stopped, let's say. So I think overall this is good for Death Guard because it will be hampering a little bit some of the other factions that were using this quite a lot. The fortifications get some more useful rules now, stating that if you cannot place a fortification on the battlefield, if you cannot be outside 3 inches, you can remove an obstacle terrain or an area terrain feature, but it's only within your own deployment zone, and then you can replace it with to make room for the fortification. But I think this is not super good for the Malignifier. The Miasmic Malignifier would be nice to put in the middle, because that's one of the best uses for that, is the spreading contagion to an area of the map, and also gives you, let's say, cover if you're close by with infantry, etc. So that would be, let's say, better if we also could do it in the middle of the board, but unfortunately not. Then looking at the missions and the objectives, the new chapter approved includes 9 new Strike Force missions and 9 Incursion missions. I will probably make a review on the new the Strike Force missions on the next video, but in this one I'm just focusing more on the objectives. So basically the primary objectives have now been changed. Previously we were scoring 5, 10, 15 for holding, let's say, 1, 2 or more than the opponent, and yeah, 1, 2 and more than the opponent. We will be getting 50 victory points per turn maximum. Now this is going to 4, 8 and 12 victory points per turn. but there is an additional mission-specific way on the primary to score more points. Some of them, they can give you 3 victory points per turn on top of what you can get here for doing some specific actions or for some killing enemy units or whatever. And some of these, as I said, will be some actions. I've read about some of the missions. So you are planting, using an action to plant a bomb or disarming a bomb that can give you victory points at the end of the game. So primary will include some specific mission way to score extra primary points. That's going to be very interesting for the missions. Playing the missions will be quite varied from mission to mission because you can no longer ignore the specific, let's say, previously it was a mission specific secondary that you could optionally take. Now it will be somehow included in the way to score the primaries. So of course this means no more mission specific secondaries. This will mean then in turn that you always have to choose 3 secondary objectives from, let's say, a standard list. One of those can be faction specific. 2 of those at least have to be from this from the Warzone Nakmund objectives. So let's look at the secondary objectives now, and some of them have been changed. In the Purge the Enemy category, we have Assassination. This has been unchanged. 3 victory points for each character model you are destroying, and +1 victory point for the Warlord. And then Bring It Down has changed a bit how the scoring is doing. You're still getting victory points for destroying enemy vehicles and monsters, but now there is updated threshold levels. So previously you would only get 1 victory point for a 10 wound vehicle. Now the bracket has, let's say, the threshold has changed. So at 10 wound, between 10 and 14 wounds, you will be getting 2 victory points, and then from 15 up, you would be getting 3 victory points. Previously, you had to have a 20 wound model to get 3 victory points or more. So I think this will make it a bit more useful, but it's penalizing some of the vehicles with 10 wounds that previously you would give your opponent only 1 victory point. Now your opponent can get 2 victory points. For example, a Rhino with 10 wounds. If you want to transport Plague Marines with a Rhino, there is a better carrot for the enemy to take, Bring It Down. Demon Engines, in the fast attack, Demon Engines will still be only giving 1 victory point, like Mephitic Lightholder, etc. The Plague Scroller will still be 2 points, but the Rhinos go up to 2 points, let's say. The Titan Hunter is unchanged. You get victory points for destroying a number of Titanic models. In the No Mercy No Respite category, there have not been super many changes. In the No Prisoners, has been getting a little buffed. Let's say the No Prisoners, you keep a kill point tally. Every time you kill a model, destroy a model that is not a vehicle, monster, or character, you add a kill point equal to the wound characteristic to the tally. So at the end, for each 10 of those, you get 1 victory point. And the new, this is of course as before, but the new, you get a bonus victory point at the end. If at the end of the game you reach 50 or more, you get 1 victory point. If you instead achieved 100 or more, you get 2 victory points on top. So for example, previously if you killed 100 wounds, let's say, of your opponent, you would getting 10 victory points. Now you will get the 2 on top. Here you will get 12 victory points. So this can make it a bit more interesting if you are facing some opponents that don't quite can give you the full. Here with the extra bonus, it gives you a little bit more incentive to take no prisoners. Grind Them Down is unchanged. 3 victory points for every battle round where you kill more enemy units than friendly units. This is quite a good death card one. Death card having, depending on your list of course as well, but death card with good durability. You should be able to kill a bit more than your opponents, depending if you're playing something like a Imperial Guard, for example, or something. It should be easy to do. If you play with Custodes, probably not so easy to do. To the last, also unchanged, you get 5 victory points each for the 3 units in your army with a high point cost. This per se hasn't changed, but with a decrease now in points for the Plague Scrollers, we are actually a bit worse off to take this one. So the plague scrollers now are 150 or 160 point, depending if they have entropy cannons or just spitters. But now with the point hikes for the Death Shroud will be 165 points for the minimum unit. The Volkite Contemptors will also be higher, 170 points. Typhus will also be higher. So there is normally, if you take Death Shroud and Plague Scrollers, previously the Plague Scrollers would have been the last models. Now it will be the Death Shroud. They are not as durable, let's say. A Volkite Contemptor not as durable at all as a Plague Scroller. Toughness 8, 12 wounds. Toughness 7, only 9 wounds. Characters, of course. So more units now that the Plague Scroller has gone down. More units that will be, let's say, that will come before the Plague Scroller was the optimal one. You would have it in the backfield, toughness 8 and discussing resilience, etc. It was an optimal choice for to the last. And then we have in this category the death card specific fleeing vectors for enemies that fail their leadership, but this is not super good, as a lot of enemy armies can basically deal with morale, and they don't care. They will not fail the morale tests. Continuing to battlefield supremacy category, we have a change on engage on all fronts. Engage on all fronts gives you 2 victory points if you have units wholly within 3 quadrants, and 3 victory points if you have 4 quadrants instead. And the quadrants, they are not, your units have to be 6 inches away from the center. They knew in the engage on all fronts that the unit, in order to count for the engage on all fronts, the unit must now have at least 3 models or be a vehicle or monster. So for example, one character alone or a depleted, let's say two Plague Marines surviving on one corner will no longer tally up for the engage on all fronts. You cannot just have a spawn somewhere alone doing it, etc. The Death Shroud deep striking was a good way, let's say, to get engage on some quarter, but now if one gets shot, which happens, then with a unit of 3 now you will be below if they lose one. The fast Daemon Engines are still good here because they are vehicles, so 30 blow drones, it's unaffected, Mephitic Blight Holders, etc. So vehicles are good for engaging on fronts, but infantry has to be carefully calculated so you don't lose too many models, so they don't count. And single characters now don't help with this one unless they are a monster like the Demon Prince. So behind enemy lines is unchanged. You get points if you have enemy units within the enemy deployment zone. I think this is quite difficult to do for Death Card in many games. Stranglehold is also unchanged. 3 victory points if you control, at the end of your turn, if you control more than 3 objectives and more than your opponent. This is optimal. This is best for 5, let's say, maps with 5 objectives. Some of them, they have one in the middle, or you can maybe control some else. This is quite strong if you go first, but of course you don't know when you will go first. This is also strong for some of the enemy's armies that can forward deploy. Death Card, we don't have such forward deploy unless we soup in Nurglings that have gone up in point cost. But the Stranglehold can be a bit difficult to take when we have a slow army. If we go first and we have a fast army, then it could be, of course, interesting on some of the maps. Here also we have the Death Card specific Despoiled Ground, but we need bubonic Astartes units. This does not include our Demon Engines or Poxwalkers, etc. So it's basically Plague Marines, Blight Lords, and Predator tanks, etc. And then you get, at the end of the battle, you can score something. But a lot of the bubonic Astartes now with the new point cost, like our Terminators, have been penalized, costing more, so it's a bit more difficult to pull this one off. Of course, if you build a lot of Plague Marines, maybe this could be interesting. In the Warcraft category, minor changes, only the Psychic Interrogation has changed. 3 victory points every time you make a psychic action. One psychic character can adapt the action, and must target. Previously it had to be a visible enemy character within 24 inches. Now it's just an enemy character within 24 inches. So basically it's like if you are within deny range, you can also interrogate. So this is okay basically, but then you will losing your psyker cannot cast other powers in an army like Thousand Suns where we have multiple psykers. It's probably easier to do that. For Death Guard where we have maybe only one plaguecaster in the band or something, then it will be probably difficult to take. Warp Ritual is unchanged. Pierce the Veil is really difficult and unchanged, so not many people take this. Abhor the Witch is also unchanged. And this could be interesting for Death Guard. The problem is that it's difficult for us to fill detachments without psykers. We need to take something like 2 patrols or a patrol and outrider. If a detachment requires 2 HQ, then we need to take a psyker. So we could take a Demon Prince and a Lord, or just a Lord and the Plaguecaster or something like that. Then we will always have a psyker, and then we cannot take Abhor the Witch. In the shadow operation category here, we have the most changes. These are actions that typically infantry can do, etc. And here we have the raise the banners high. This is unchanged, where you can infantry units can raise the banner, or multiple can do it at the same time on objectives, and then you score points every time you keep the flag, let's say the banner on this objective marker. Of course, when we are talking about actions, and I'll talk a bit more about that, Death Guard we're a bit at a disadvantage because, for example, remember that our Poxwalkers cannot do actions. They can only do a specific Death Guard spread the sickness action, so they cannot be used, even if they are infantry, they cannot be used to do intelligent actions like apparently raising a banner. Investigate signal has been changed a little bit. There is an investigate action. You have to be within 6 inches of the center, no enemy units within 6 inches, and it's completed at the end of the own turn. You also have the possibility to, if you can destroy the enemy unit within 6 inches, then the action can complete. Now the change is that it needs a unit with 3 plus models to do. So again, there is more restrictions to do the actions. You can't just have a remnant 1-2 models from a big unit and still do this, or there was some infantry units that could do that. Just you only had some action monkeys. Death Guard was not particularly good at this, but some of the other armies could do this quite easily. But again, so here it needs a bit more planning, more models in order to do, for example, the investigate signal. When we go to the deploy teleport homer, infantry or biker unit, again, remember not Poxwalkers, they can perform this action if they are within 12 inches of the enemy deployment zone. The action is completed at the next command phase, own command phase, if the unit still is alive and is doing this action. So this was always a bit tricky when you try to do something and your opponent has a whole turn to maybe wipe you out. But now the new thing here, and making I think the deploy teleport homer a bit more interesting, if the unit doing this action is a troop, for example, for us it would be Plague Marines or Cultists, the action completes in our own turn. And this is 2 victory points per completed action, or 4 victory points if the unit was wholly within the enemy deployment zone, and there doesn't seem to be a restriction on the number of models to do so. So troops here are better for the deploy teleport homer. This could be a bit interesting. We don't basically have biker units at Death Guard, but again, as I said, our troops choices are quite limited. That can do actions. It's Plague Marines or Cultists, and they have to be close to the enemy deployment zone for it to work. But a bit more interesting than it was before for Death Guard. And then we had the retrieve Octarius data. Now this is called retrieve Nakmun data. And the changes here is that now it can be done by infantry or biker units, not a character, and can retrieve an action in 1/4, a retrieve action in 1/4 of the battlefield that does not have a retrieve action yet. The action completes at the end of the turn, but now the big change here is to complete it, you now are required to make a roll. You need to roll equal or less to the number of models that are doing the action. And troops get a benefit -1 to the roll here. So you can see that if you only have previously a lot of armies had, let's say, some lictor that could deep strike at a quarter alone for 40 points or 30 points what it costs, and then he could do the retrieve Octarius data. Now, if you only have one unit and it's not a troop, one model doing the action, you would need to roll a 1 to be successful. If you have a troop, a 5-man troops will be always successful. But again, if you only have 2-3 Terminators surviving, they cannot, the action they need to roll a 2 or a 3 to be successful. So this becomes much more difficult and needs more units, let's say more models to be successful. I think for Death Guard, it was not I never felt that retrieve Octarius data was optimal for us. So I think this might impact more the enemy enemy armies that had it almost as an auto take. The scoring is the same: 4 victory points if you retrieved data from 2 sectors at the end, 8 if you retrieved from 3, and 12 if you retrieved from all 4. So as I said, 5-man troops, like a 5-man unit of Plague Marines, will auto-make the roll now. Poxwalkers cannot do it. A big unit of cultists would be successful. We could be deep striking, let's say, Blight Lords to do this, but again, deep striking a 210 point model to do one action here would be quite expensive. 3 Death Shroud would not be particularly they have a 50-50 chance to make it, let's say. So it's a bit more tricky to do this. Here we also have the Death Guard specific spread the sickness action. This is the only action our Poxwalkers can do, and one Death Guard unit can start the action when they are close to an objective, and they can contaminate objectives. If we play a map with 6 objectives, or at least 4 or 5 objectives, if we can get and spread the sickness to those, it's good. It's not as good as the Grey Knights Purifying Ritual or some of the other factions, but it's an action at least our Poxwalkers also can do. So trying to summarize all the secondaries and scoring them somehow within the category. I think in the Purge the Enemy, the Assassinate is the best one. You can get quite a lot of victory points, even if the opponent only have 3-4 characters. Of course, you need to destroy a lot of enemies. It's not like we have easy to snipe enemy characters, but if we come into melee, we could kill characters. At least in this category, Assassinate is better than Bring It Down. Bring It Down now got a bit boosted, let's say with thresholds for the victory points. In the No Mercy, No Respite, to the last was the best, I think, the best secondary objective for Death Guard, building on our durability, and especially if we could do it on our Plaguebear Scrollers, which are one of the most durable units in the game. Also, a big blob of Terminators are good, but now the Plaguebear Scrollers become cheaper. It's difficult to get them to be to the last, so I think it will be a little bit more difficult to take this one. Grind them down is something that Death Guard should be naturally good at with our durability, but depends a lot on your opponent. No prisoners got a buff, so it could be interesting. Fleeing vectors from the Death Guard specific, not good with the morale checks being not a big part of the game. In Battlefield Supremacy, engage on all fronts is quite good. When I started playing, I was using engage on all fronts in nearly all of my games, but then now with 9th edition, I've been going more to the last because I didn't want to spread out my force. And it's better to get points for not doing anything, like to the last just surviving. Here you have to be active, and you have to be active to do all this warpcraft and the shadow operations and stuff like that. But I think engagement on fronts becomes more interesting now, where to the last maybe it's not as interesting, but then we have to be doing that with our vehicles and our fast attack demon engines. The spoil ground for Death Guard could be okay, a stranglehold, depending on the maps, behind enemy lines, not very easy to do for us. The Warcraft, the psychic actions, maybe could be interesting. Warp ritual if there is a objective in the middle, psychic interrogation depending, but not super good choices. Abhor the Witch is a good one if you're facing something like Grey Knights and Thousand Suns or something like that, enemy armies with a lot of psychers. But Death Guard is it's very difficult to build lists without psychers. You really have to take 2 detachments, and for 2,000 points, you need to take 2 detachments with only 1 HQ in each. Not very easy to do. Pierce the Veil is terrible. In the shadow operation, those of course, as I said, require actions. Spread the Sickness could be a good one. Maybe it's in the medium. I prefer if I didn't have to do actions and just use the points I paid to deliver something on the table and hold objectives and so on. I would prefer to select from these categories, but Spread the Sickness could be quite good. Raise the Banners High could be also good for Death Guard if we can play a bit defensively, raise some banners and protect them. And Retreat Nakmun data, not optimal for Death Guard. Investigate Signal also. Deploy Teleport Homers could be something that sees more play now that Retrieve Nakmun data, the previously Octarius, has been changed. So summary on the change for Death Guard, I think one of my favorite secondaries to the last will be more difficult, and this will be quite list dependent. There seems to be a push to go to more doing more actions and managing actions for the many new missions, where we have the split of the primary scoring. As Death Guard, I think unfortunately we are at a disadvantage on actions. It feels like we have to fight with one arm behind our back, or both arms chopped off, and then the legs chopped off maybe in the next balanced data slate. If you remember this Monty Python film, you probably know what I mean. So I think the disadvantage comes from that we typically have expensive infantry. We don't have any strats or abilities to, for example, do actions and then shoot. I mean, investing in a big blob of Blight Lords for them to have to do an action or do something particular and then not use their weapons, it's a bit waste of points. We don't have very fast infantry that can go and do a lot of actions and be quickly up the field. Our cheap and durable infantry, the Poxwalkers, are totally handicapped with actions. I mean, a lot of the other factions, they have multiple troops, maybe some elite and some less elite that they can do. All of them can do actions, but we are hampered by that. Maybe this will lead to using more cultists. They are cheaper now than the Poxwalkers. They can do actions, but the cultists are suffering, of course, from objective secure, and they are not at all as durable as the Poxwalkers were. The Plague Marines don't have the survivability with a meta. If there are a lot of nice weapons with high AP and damage 1, our Plague Marines are not very well protected. If a character comes near them in melee, they suddenly have very bad saves. They are dying here and there. So to move across the field and do consistently actions, and especially when some of these new actions require high model counts, it's not very easy to do. I think it's not optimal. And maybe this will lead to some builds where we're using rhinos to transport the marines so they can come to places where they need to be and do actions. But remember also, the rhinos will be giving 2 victory points in Bring It Down for the enemy. So actions probably is going to be a key. We'll have to see how the Plague Marines survive. Will this be also giving rise to more cultists to do actions in the meta, depending on the missions? That will be interesting to follow. If we're going with Daemon Engine lists, I think Engage on All Fronts is a good choice. The Daemon engines are quite durable. They are vehicles. They can fly and have fast movement. They can be on multiple quarters. So I think that is a good choice here. Assassination, as I said, probably depending if your enemy has 3-4 characters. Even with 3 characters, one of them being the warlord, you will be scoring 10 victory points here. So that's good. If you play some army that has 4 or 5 characters, then you should try to take it and try to kill them, let's say. Grind them down, more interesting again as an alternative to the last. Also a good fit with the Daemon Engine list, where we have a lot of vehicles that are not so easy to take down. If we're facing a horde type enemy or something like that, then grind them down will be good. No prisoners also, with a buff on getting a bit more victory points from that one, depending on the opponent, could be an alternative to grind them down. And to the last, on the action related, I think raise the banners could be interesting if the objectives are close and defendable. Let's say you can also use some infantry characters like the Tallyman to raise a banner in the beginning. You can also, we can do the spread the sickness. If we have poxwalkers in our army, that's a good way to use them. Maybe also deploy teleport homers could be useful with plague marines. So, reaching to the final thoughts, as I said, to the last will be harder to play optimally with the plague per scroller cost down. We always have to find 3 secondary objectives from the list. A general move towards more action oriented play will probably shift death card lists towards more plague marines, and maybe cultists can begin finding some use. Could we use raise the banners, spread the sickness, deploy teleport homers, maybe warp ritual, maybe grind them down here, something killy depending on the opponent, like assassination, bring it down, or no prisoners. The point changes that we saw, another way would be, instead of going action plague marine style, maybe more lists towards death card Daemon Engine vehicle list with Epidemius in, etc. I think for this, grind them down or to the last would be a good one. Engage on all fronts fits well with the fast Daemon Engines, and then something killy depending on the opponent. So these are my initial thoughts, and I will, as I said, I will look more into the missions and their mission primaries, discussing there in a later video. What do you think about the secondaries and the changes to match play? How do you think they will play in with the new points for death card? And I've been following all your comments, and yeah, we are in a quite a bad situation, I think, with the point increases to some of our best units. The plague scrollers at least get cheaper, but that hurts our secondary choice, let's say. But I think, as always, we will adapt, and we will come back again in the competitive scene. So, what do you think about the secondaries and the changes, etc.? How do you think they will fit death card? Any combination or list that you've been thinking with secondaries? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to further support my effort, please visit my Patreon page. And with these words, General Yanis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.